Well, let me be quite clear from the outset. The Human Rights Commission, or as I call it, the Human Rights for Some People We Like Commission, is just an activist group that should be immediately defunded. But the government has just appointed some new staff, and a bun fight has resulted. So if you want evidence of why you, the taxpayer, should not be funding activist groups like the Human Rights Commission or the Human Rights for People We Like Commission, you only need to look at their recent publication, 102 pages of pure bunkum that wasted a tree in printing. It was called the Conversions Practices Insight Report. And remember, according to the Human Rights Commission themselves, the $2.2 million taxpayer-funded complaint centre set up by the Human Rights Commission for receiving complaints about conversion therapy has struggled to obtain any complaints about the use of conversion therapy since the law was passed, despite the fact that they've spent bucket loads of money advertising its services. There's been no complaints to the police. The police acknowledged they haven't received direct complaints warranting an investigation. So this is all consistent with numbers before the law was passed. The taxpayer, via the Human Rights Commission, has spent more than $2 million of your taxpayer money looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Now, this report took 18 months to write. Think of all the wages paid by you for this report. I mean, they had to spend the $2.2 million quickly, so they had to justify their existence somehow. But here's why the report is useful only for starting fires. They actually say in the report, we received a small amount of feedback from those supportive of conversion practices as a way to uphold what they perceive to be the rights of families and religious communities to discipline or try to change those in their care. Yeah, well, there's some loaded words in just that sentence, isn't there? But then they say, we have not given space to those views in this report. It's shocking, isn't it? And in a Official Information Act request that I referred to previously, they admitted, quote, the Commission has not knowingly had any engagement with individuals who made submissions against the conversion therapy law and who had positive experiences of receiving counselling to deal with unwanted sexuality and gender confusion issues. So the Human Rights Commission don't want to hear any contra view. They don't want feedback. They don't listen to the feedback. They only want human rights for those they agree with. Now, you can read more of in-depth analysis of this waste of documentation on an earlier episode of McBLOG. I will put the link in the explainer. But then last week, sort of on a Friday when I think most of the news crew were sort of busy and not focusing, the Justice Minister, the media sort of go to sleep on a Friday afternoon. So the Justice Minister, Paul Goldsmith, announced that he was appointing some new commissioners, and one was Dr. Stephen Rainbow as the new Chief Human Rights Commissioner. And the media release said Dr. Rainbow's career has encompassed a range of roles, including managing government relations for the largest infrastructure project in New Zealand, lecturing at Victoria University, and National Manager of the New Zealand Historic Places Trust. Paul Goldsmith, the minister, said he served as a Wellington City Councillor from 1989 to 1998. He's been active in promoting LGBT rights and is a former member of the AIDS Foundation, or the Burnett Foundation as it's called now. In fact, I found an article by him in 2012 during the same-sex marriage debate. Stephen Rainbow wrote an opinion piece in the New Zealand Herald saying that allowing same-sex marriage could draw home expats and boost economy. He said at a time when New Zealand is losing 1,000 people a week to the rich pickings of Western Australia, has anyone thought that legalising gay marriage might be one way of attracting people back? Well, it's a great theory. Same-sex marriages represent just 2% of all marriages. That has not changed. But look, Mr. Rainbow seems to tick the boxes. Victoria University, active in promoting LGBT rights, involved with the AIDS Foundation, writing articles in the New Zealand Herald to support same-sex marriage, and that surname. Perfect. What could possibly go wrong? Well, plenty actually, because the activists went digging and they found this article. They dug up this article from 2021. Auckland Transport is investigating a social media post by a member of management about gay conversion therapy. So Stephen Rainbow used to work for AT, Auckland Transport, which has sparked anger and allegations of transphobia from a council employee. And apparently he posted this. He replied to a post in the Rainbow Auckland networking group on Facebook. The post was calling for people to sign the petition to ban gay conversion therapy. And Rainbow's reply, you can see there down the bottom, he said, "Be careful. There's some elements of the trans agenda being sneakily promoted through this campaign." Whew. Well, that prompted complaints about transphobia. And they were speaking out against it. The people speaking out against it included one of Stephen Rainbow's colleagues at AT. Now, Rowan Fozzie, the administrator for the Facebook group where the post was made, said he has removed it, while reminding other members to refrain from comments that are hateful and hurtful to others. Fozzie, who is also a member of the executive team of Rainbow Auckland, said those kinds of comments are not welcome at all, and is still recovering from the shock that something of this nature was posted in a group which he felt should be inclusive. That just doesn't live to our values, he said. Well, correction, Fozzie means doesn't live to my values, his values, Fozzie's. Now, of course, Stephen Rainbow is dead right on this particular issue. The conversion therapy law means that someone who's struggling with gender identity issues, wants help, cannot receive counselling even if they consent to it. The counsellor could be committing a crime because it comes under the definition of conversion therapy, even if the person requests it. That's how desperate politicians and activists are to shut down any dissent against the trans agenda, because the agenda cannot stand critique on its own merits. But as I mentioned earlier, the Human Rights Commission don't want to hear any contra view. But now they've just appointed somebody with a contra view. Shocking. I mean, he's like a terf, you know, a feminist who believes that only a woman can be a woman, that a dude cannot be a woman, and that only women can get pregnant and breastfeed. Yeah, I know. Radical. But then it got worse. And according to this report in Stuff, during an interview with Stuff earlier this year, Rainbow made a series of attacks against the Green Party for criticising Israel's attacks on Gaza. The war, which started when Gaza-based Hamas militants attacked Israel in October and killed about 1,200 people, well, that's been verified by Israel and was actually lowered from original estimates by Israel because they actually investigated the truth of the figures. It goes on, has seen Israel's defense force kill more than 40,000 Gazans. A completely made-up figure which is not being corroborated, reported by Hamas itself, and actually increases as the left-wing media decide to increase it. The article says, meanwhile, tensions in the West Bank, a Palestinian territory separate from Gaza, are also boiling. Rainbow called the... I need to say Stephen Rainbow, don't I, just to avoid confusion. Stephen Rainbow called the Green Party's focus on those issues a distraction and said it was turning away voters. In subsequent posts to social media, he called on his followers to back Israel. Now, after that report, the other, say after me, independent media immediately lockstepped into the narrative with the New Zealand Herald. And they said, new Chief Human Rights Commissioner Stephen Rainbow's pro-Israel Facebook posts transphobia accusations. And they said, newly appointed Chief Human Rights Commissioner Stephen Rainbow has previously made pro-Israel posts on his personal Facebook page and was once accused of being transphobic, prompting an investigation by his then employer, Auckland Transport. But Dr. Rainbow, who takes up the role later this year, said his views on Israel weren't particularly relevant. His focus was on human rights in this country. He said, you don't get to my age without having some opinions, okay? But I tend to be absolutely professional in this role and to encourage dialogue and discussion around the critical issues that New Zealand is facing with regards to human rights. End quote. Good luck on that. The Herald continues. in its article and says, but other pro-Israel comments were made by Rainbow after the 23 Hamas-led assault that killed about 1,200 people in Israel, led to about 250 more being abducted and taken into Gaza. A military offensive launched by Israel in response has killed more than 40,000 civilians and combatants in Gaza. Now, where have I heard that exact narrative before? Oh, yes, of course, the Stuff report. And then Radio New Zealand joined the pile on. And they said, back in 2021, Stuff and One News both reported that Auckland Transport was investigating a social media post by Stephen Rainbow to the Rainbow Auckland networking group. And then the odious spin-off website also went on the attack. Can you be a Human Rights Commission and transphobic at the same time? And they do note that they say Stephen Rainbow was a gay man and been a vocal advocate for gay marriage, as well as a former board member of New Zealand AIDS Foundation. On first glance, Rainbow's history suggests at the very least a support of the full Rainbow community. But the love for our LGBT ally, Stephen Rainbow, only goes so far. And when you dare challenge the holy grail of the conversion therapy law, you're in trouble. And when you dare to express support for Israel, then that love is gone, not inclusive. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Either you're with us 100% or you're out. Keep your personal opinions to yourself. Now, I think Radio New Zealand could smell blood, and there was another interview this morning, and it said the newly appointed Chief Human Rights Commissioner says he's committed to continuing the Commission's work protecting the rights of trans people despite facing accusations of transphobia. Stephen Rainbow takes up the role later this year. He's defending his appointment because of his posts. And he had an interview on Morning Report. Have a listen to just a little bit of the interview. He starts well. He starts well for the left, for the media. They'd like him. But he definitely goes on track towards the end. Talks about free speech. Shocking. Have a listen.
You'd acknowledge that the transgender community is a community which often feels marginalised and is overrepresented in a number of statistics around mental health and suicide and those sort of things.
Totally. And as a gay man myself, I come from a generation of gay men who, if they didn't leave New Zealand, too often committed suicide and then had to go through and survive the AIDS epidemic. And I guess one of my great sadnesses around if we could describe it as around the polarisation which is occurring in this space, is that I think we should be doing a better job of sharing our stories and drawing on some of the experiences. I mean, the way that we made progress with gay issues was not through shouting on social media. It was actually through sitting down, even with those who might have not appeared immediately to have been our allies, to make progress on critical issues. So we come back to the centrality of the willingness for civil discourse, discussion, debate, drawing on evidence. And we need to do much more of that, and that's what I'd be committed to doing in this role.
Where does the issue of free speech and hate speech sit in your mind? I think your predecessor had been quite a strong supporter of some new hate speech legislation in New Zealand. Now, that has not progressed. What is your view on the need for hate speech legislation?
My view is much more towards the desperate need to protect free speech, and I think, as our society gets more polarised and divided, the importance of free speech becomes even greater, in my opinion.
Whew. Yeah, it just went downhill, especially for the media. Those statements about suicide and AIDS and leaving the country, I'm not quite sure about the credibility of that. But then things got worse, if you can believe it. According to the press release from the Beehive, it said that Dr. Melissa Darby is going to become the new Race Relations Commissioner. The media release says Dr. Darby is a senior lecturer at Waikato University teaching early literacy and human development. Her primary area of research is early literacy, and in particular exploring the role of whānau in fostering foundational pre-literacy skills. And she's also received a Fulbright Award. Now, that's why you'll see her photo. That's her photo at the top there. And part of the reason they weren't going after Stephen Rainbow just in this article was because they said, quote, Darby has previously been named as a member of the Free Speech Union. In an April 2023 column by RNZ's Media Watch on protests around the anti-trans right activist Kelly Jane Keane, lies, also known as Posey Parker, it was reported that Darby liked a tweet calling for trans activist Chanel Lowell to be locked up and retweeted one saying the trans movement cannot be tolerated in civil society. Well, actually, she was backing a petition for Chanel Lowell to be fired as a New Zealand Herald columnist. And interestingly enough, and thankfully, he did eventually lose that job, but he's now working for a Labour Member of Parliament. These were the tweets which he posted that Melissa Darby was opposed to. Cis men uphold the patriarchy, so here's a big F you. F off fag. Apparently that's not homophobic language when Chanel says it. Transphobic gays and lesbians are the ugliest part of the queer community. F the patriarchy and F transphobia. And his charming tweet to Posey Parker, you coward terf, we say F terfs. Now, that kind of messaging gets you the Kiwi Bank Young Person of the Year. Oh, and a job in a Labour Member of Parliament's office. But see, the media don't see a problem with that. Now, they also highlight that Melissa Darby has also appeared in a series of videos for the website The Common Room, with titles like Equity or Equality, and a video a discussion entitled, Is the System Stacked Against Some Kiwis? Here's a short clip that the media wants you to be offended by, as she challenges the notion that we can blame success or failure purely on systemic racism.
I promoted hard work, good manners, and a winning attitude as a tried and true combination that has contributed to the success of countless individuals and groups for many generations, I will be accused of all manner of sins. That's because what is suggested nowadays is that it's the system that causes success or failure. It's our skin colour or ethnic background that matters. And ultimately, that until things like systemic racism or privilege end, the outcomes that some people experience will never change. We find these sorts of ideas everywhere, and they seem to be directed at Māori in particular. Now, it is important to acknowledge that no system is perfect and that racism has affected many and is something to be abhorred. However, the idea that systems are the sole or primary cause of particular outcomes is largely based on assumption and actually ignores a lot of evidence about success that paints quite a different picture. This idea also raises some crucial questions that need to be answered for the rhetoric to ring true. For example, if systemic racism, which we are told permeates our systems and institutions, is the cause for a disproportionate number of Māori experiencing poor outcomes, why don't all Māori experience poor outcomes? In fact, on many measures, the vast majority of Māori perform perfectly well. How is this possible if systemic racism is everywhere, causing poor outcomes? Another critical question we must ask ourselves is what damage is being done to Māori perceptions and potential by promoting these ideas?
Yeah, shocking, eh? I mean, where's the critical race theory in all of that? Where's the victim narrative or the oppressed card? The spin-off website continued to whine and said, then there's Melissa Darby, our new Race Relations Commissioner. Darby is a founding member of the Free Speech Union and has also raised eyebrows by sharing posts that were decidedly anti-trans. In 2023, after the trans right protest in Albert Park, Darby shared a tweet saying the trans movement cannot be tolerated in civil society. Well, exactly right. The trans movement, as we saw at Albert Park last year with its violence, intimidation, assaulting of women and censorship, cannot be tolerated in a civil society. But wait. There's even more. In 2020, Spinoff says that Darby spoke at an event hosted by the anti-trans group Speak Up for Women. The same event cancelled by Massey University amid safety concerns. She opened with a mihi, then confusingly followed it with a joke about how apparently you're not allowed to criticise anything Māori. Darby then wasted no time in making her general views known. She said, as far as points in the oppression Olympics are concerned, I'm always off to a pretty good start being female with Māori heritage, although now that people who are biologically men want to compete in our sports teams, my winning streak may be coming to an end. Well, you can always tell when the government gets it right when Helen Clark, our former Prime Minister, comes out criticising things, and out she came over the weekend. She said, looking at the profiles of some new appointees to the New Zealand Human Rights Commission, there are grounds for concern. Such senior statutory appointments need to be able to command respect. Ideologically extreme appointments won't and would diminish the institution. Let me just translate that for you. What Helen Clark is saying is people should only be respected if they agree with me. Thanks, Helen. We'll keep that in mind. Look, while there's some improvement in terms of staffing, I'll finish with how I started. It's time to wrap up these activist governmental groups. The Human Rights Commission has served no useful purpose. And despite some of the good statements coming from the new appointees, I'm not sure it's any more relevant and any more needed. Let's save some taxpayer dollars and get some nurses and teachers.